This is one big episode to undertake. Starhenge is huge, like really huge. It is probably the most intimidating island to undertake simply because of how important and big the whole thing is. Even though it only has 12 monsters, those 12, debatably 11, are far and beyond some of the greatest and most powerful performances that have ever been seen in the entire franchise, and ranking them all was insanely difficult. Yes, you heard that right. We ranked all 12 of the Celestials. Instead of doing a traditional top and bottom 3 for this island, I'm going to do a countdown from best to worst, just to spice things up and to make sure not one Celestial goes unmentioned. Oh, also saying this in advance, but because we're talking about Starhenge today, this obviously means I will not be doing Celestial Island next time, so don't vote for it, please. So, let's start off with the best monster on the island. Yeah, I know usually the best monster is the last thing I talk about in these videos, but I feel like with Starhenge it's a case of everyone already knows what the best monster is going to be, so why make people wait? Surprising absolutely no one, the best monster on Starhenge is Scaritar, the first one they ever released. The amount of effort and intricacy in this monster's 3 tracks is inspiring, and the way it plays along with the others is mind-boggling. It's amazing how something can do so much while doing so little at the same time in the greater scheme of things. Everything from the otherworldly strings to the synthetic chords underlying it to the tiny little prickly percussions you hear underneath all that is just the makeup of one truly awe-inspiring sound. And that's not even mentioning the wistful winds that also can be heard at times that really accent the godlike status that these monsters have with its whimsy and indefinable nature. All in all, it's easy to see why this monster is highly regarded as one of the best single tracks BBB has ever made. It is up to the elite music plane of existence that I previously only let Flock stay in. Second best monster is one that completely carries the melody of the second half of the song. That's right, it's Blasoom. Nothing really can describe just how incredible this monster's melody is. I mean, having 3 tracks that bounce off each other perfectly with no repeating track is something that can't be accomplished by any monster normally. This thing is a different beast altogether though, and it does this task perfectly and then some. The reason Scaritar places higher than it is not because Blasoom is worse, but just because Scaritar does more. Blasoom is a perfect monster by this island's standards, and comparing this track alone to the other islands in the game, it'd still be in Blasoom's favor. That's just how good it really is. Third best is honestly one that I don't see enough people really talk about, Hornicle. This thing is one of the most powerful and awe-inspiring tracks to exist. Every single one sends chills down my spine with how mighty and triumphant they are, and man do I love it. With its coral beard of French horns, Hornicle manages to carry a ton of stuff on its shoulders, and I'm not talking about the coral reef either. Unfortunately, as time went on though, Hornicle's triumphant song fell a little by the wayside compared to the many melodies and percussive elements that play alongside it, only really allowing it to fully go all out during the first half's final verse. This is still enough to land it at third though, as that just goes to show the quality and majesty that went into creating this one monster. Oh, also side note that doesn't impact its placement because this is a musical based show, but Hornicle's design destroys me from the art perspective, and the artist who drew it deserves huge props. Fourth is a special one, since if this monster didn't exist, the second half of the song would just be god-awful tonally, and that monster is Vamp. I could have placed Vamp higher because of just how much it impacts the song, but I decided to put it here because while it's angelic and beautiful, at the end of the day it's still just chords. I don't want to discredit Vamp though, since the progression it has is beautiful and complements Blasoom perfectly, accenting its own melody so that the entire verse rings much more majestic. That's the true power of chords, taking a melody that's already amazing and sending it beyond that. Like I said at the beginning, the second half of the song would have been doomed without Vamp, since the percussion doesn't do justice to the build-up of the first verse and Blasoom starts too late to be impactful as a transition. So Vamp fills a very important role in the song's structure since it really is the only dividing point between the 2 verses. Fifth place is probably the fan favorite, Ludwig. This Celestial is so absolutely oppressively dark and I live for the vibe it's going for. Its concept is amazing and its animations are smooth as well. It's easy to see how this thing got so popular. Beyond that though, the melody is just really interesting. accenting the first half with a sinister tone that carries through until the end when it transitions from a menacing nature to a more bombastic one. The reason Ludwig places lower than the others, though, is for two reasons. One is the fact that it simply doesn't do as much as the other four in the grand scheme of things. It's entirely an accented melody to the main ones. Second is that the full song has it kinda painfully inaudible, to the point where it docks points from the overall score. Placing at number 6, we got the first percussionist on the island released, and that's Tort. It may seem weird to put Tort above some of the other things we have on this list, but I truly believe the song just does not work without Tort's steady rhythm to tie it all together. Obviously, because of its percussive nature, it'd be hard for it to ever place above, say, a melody monster, but I still adore this one. Tort's rhythm is so interesting and fun that it was one of the first percussive lines I ever fully learned how to properly play on drums, and it holds the entire percussive element on its own in the first half, only being minorly assisted by another monster. Its sound is deceptively complex as well, with the hi-hats having that delay at the end, the heavy toms being played alongside the kick line, and the crashes at the end overlapping the toms in interesting ways. All in all, this is the best percussive monster on the island, without question. Those 6 are what I consider to be absolutely perfect monsters in every way possible. They do everything the song needs them to do and overall are just flawless in execution. 7th, however, is one I think people have been shocked to not see up there, and that's Atmos. I'll be the first to say that I adore Atmos' concept. If this were an art and concept contest and not a musical one, then Atmos would win first place hands down. Well, actually, second, because Hornicle exists. Musically, Atmos is really sound as well, with the air guitar line working shockingly well alongside Scaritar and all of these orchestral influences. The voice is super distinct and memorable, and all in all it just oozes personality. The reason it's so low, however, is that while it's great, it also doesn't fully feel like it's better than the 4 before first and second. I'll admit, placing monsters on this tier list was absolutely impossible for us to do. We had to look at every individual monster and ask each other if we thought it was better or worse than one of the other 12 until we placed most by a point average. Atmos was just unfortunate enough to land at 7th. It's still a pretty great monster, and I think it could easily land at even 4th place, but that's once you factor in design and stuff. At number 8, we have a really charming monster, Glacial. I think Glacial is a really good monster that unfortunately was just placed among literally perfect monsters, so unfortunately it's a bit lower on the list. The percussive line it adds in the first half is pretty good, and its impact on the second half is nothing but positive. It's just not the most revolutionary sound and impact ever. The vocal performance is really well done, and it's also impactful to the song when paired alongside the other godlike entities of Vamp and Blasoom. Overall, I say Glacial is a really solid monster that easily could be passed as the number 1 best by any other island standards. It's just being placed alongside this island standards, so it doesn't quite reach it. This is the last monster that is decent on Starhenge. After this one, we're going to be getting into the 3 bad parts of the song. At 9th place we have Syncopite, one of the most overlooked Celestials. The percussive line this monster adds is really dope, honestly. It may be a bit disappointing because of the amazing design and build up to it, but I still really like it. If it didn't play so little, all things considered, I probably could have placed it above Glacial, but the fact that it only plays for 2 parts at the end of the song is kind of a death blow in a song this bloated. Let's just say, in an island with only 12 monsters, you really shouldn't have monsters play for a small portion of it only. It scrapes by the bottom 3 though by still being a positive impact on the song. Removing Syncopite does in fact make the song worse, so it gets 9th. Alright, these are the 3 bad monsters on this island, and by process of elimination, I know you already know what they are. But now the question lies in where are they? Well, at 10th we have Plixie, so that narrows it down. Now, I like Plixie as a monster, and one thing you all probably wondered when I started this video is which one of these Celestials would be my birth one. I think the fact that Plixie is my birth Celestial will show my lack of bias when it comes to these rankings. Plixie is a really unique idea on paper, but in execution it's just really awkward and weird. It's not awful by any means, but one thing I learned is that the song is actually better when you remove Plixie from the song. I don't have any ill will against the monster, it just doesn't impact the song in a positive way at times, so it just comes off as half-baked ideas that could have used some more time in the oven. Also, I just gotta mention that when the island was being added to, Plixie being the fourth Celestial was an awful idea. It made that month of the song painful. Second place is the most disappointing of the Celestials, Furnos. The sound isn't really that awful in the grand scheme of things, but I can't overlook just how terribly underwhelming this thing is. I know I'm kind of being biased here because I'm only supposed to think about the musical aspect of these monsters, but look at it this way. The fire element is the most important element to the lore of the games. It is the dividing point between Dawn of Fire and MSM, and it is so important that its return to MSM was given 2 islands with whole entire events surrounding them. The only other element I can think of that is as important as fire is electricity, and don't worry, we'll get to that. Anyway, fire is absolutely vital to Dawn of Fire, and this is the monster they chose to represent it? Plixie is technically worse from a musical standpoint, so if you really want to, imagine Plixie is 11 and Furnos is 10. But this aspect of being a letdown rings so loudly to me that I can't not place it here. Alright, I know you probably guessed what last place is already based on just it being the last monster on the island. Plixie and Furnos were pretty off-putting, but I still think they work in the song enough to not warrant their removal. But this monster is the only one I consider to be a truly awful piece of crap sucky suck on the level of the other islands. Not only is Galvana the worst monster on Starhenge, I widely consider it to be the single worst monster in the entirety of MSM. That used to belong to Magpie, but Water Island Magpie isn't that bad, so Galvana was able to grab the #1 spot. Galvana has 2 islands, and on both of them it literally ruins the entire song. Let's dissect this one part at a time, shall we? In the first half of the song, Galvana starts off pretty strong and interesting, but what you'll soon realize is that it is so shrill at parts that it literally hurts your eardrums if you keep the sound too loud. This thing is painful to listen to at the end of the first half, being layered on top of the already loud triumphant parts. If it just had that, then maybe I could give it a pass, but then we have the second part. Oh god, the second part. How did they do this? What made them do this, and why did they do this? Who thought this 4-bar, insanely annoying phrase should be repeated 12 flipping times? Do I even need to say more? Do you really need more convincing than that? This monster is a painful stain on Starhenge's almost perfect record, and the absolute worst way they could have finished the song. I do not have any sense of empathy for this monster, since it is around the most rotten thing in the entire song. That got a bit heated at the end, but yeah. Galvana excluded, I think every Celestial has merit to exist in some way or another, and 9 out of 12 of them are borderline flawless monsters that form a perfectly amazing song. Nothing else captures the magnitude and sheer power this song exudes in every note, and I still consider it to be one of the best achievements PvP has done. Sadly, because Galvana exists though, it gets dragged through the mud a bit, so I can't give it the flawless record that it so rightfully deserves. But think of that as just another reason to hate Galvana instead of the song. Next week will be a pretty busy week for me, so let's not pick a really big song, please. I got a lot on my plate and I can't handle another Celestial Island or Tribal Island. With that being said, the next island will probably be out by then, so I wonder where it'll end up placing on the list. Well, we'll see when it happens. Until then, see you all in the next video.